The Price of Knowing Who You Truly Are. Section 1. The Hook and the Great Question. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that every decision you've ever made, your career, your relationships, even the way you walk into a room, wasn't fully your own. Imagine the terrifying possibility that beneath the surface of your carefully constructed life, you don't really know who you are. At first, the thought might feel absurd. After all, you've carried your name since childhood, repeated your likes and dislikes countless times, described your personality on job applications, dating profiles, and in conversations with friends. You know your favorite foods, your hobbies, the music that makes you feel alive. But pause for a moment. Is this truly you? Or is it a collection of roles, expectations, and borrowed stories? What if you is nothing more than an echo of what others told you to be? The unsettling truth is that identity is fragile. It feels solid, like a rock, but in reality it's more like a mirror, always reflecting, always shifting, depending on what or who is standing in front of it. From the moment you were born, your sense of self has been shaped by whispers, commands, praise, punishment, approval, and rejection. Parents told you who you were. Teachers measured you against others. Society offered you boxes to fit into. And somewhere along the way, you accepted the reflection as truth. But here's the paradox. You cannot live fully without knowing yourself. Yet the moment you begin to peel back the layers, you risk unraveling the very fabric of your existence. To ask, "Who am I really?" is to invite chaos into the order of your life. It is to open the door to a reality where the foundation beneath your feet is no longer guaranteed. Would you dare to walk through that door? Consider this. Every myth, every spiritual tradition, every philosophy that has endured through time has wrestled with the same haunting question. The ancient Greeks etched it into the stone of Delphi, "Know thyself." But they never warned what it would cost, because knowing who you truly are means discovering truths that might destroy the life you thought you wanted. What happens if you discover that your ambitions were never yours, but inherited dreams from a parent who lived through you? What if your morality, the good and bad you cling to, is simply an imprint of culture, geography, or religion, not a truth you chose freely? What if the person your friends admire is only a mask that hides the stranger beneath your skin? You've been told your whole life that self-knowledge is the highest good, but no one speaks of the sacrifices. No one mentions the moments of despair when the old self begins to dissolve, leaving you suspended in uncertainty, unsure of who you are without your illusions.
No one warns you that this process might cost you your relationships, your comfort, your sense of belonging, and yet something in you hungers for it. Why else would you still be reading? Why else does a part of you ache at night with questions you cannot silence? Am I living my life or merely performing it? Is my identity truth or theater? The unsettling irony is that ignorance is comfortable. To never question who you are is to remain safe in the familiar cocoon of habit and expectation. And yet comfort comes at a price too. The slow suffocation of your soul, the quiet despair of living without ever truly meeting yourself. So here you stand, at the edge of a precipice. Behind you is the life you've always known, predictable, familiar, and unquestioned. Ahead lies the unknown, a dangerous, exhilarating journey into the uncharted territories of your own psyche. The great question is this: are you willing to pay the price of knowing who you truly are? Because once you begin, there is no turning back. And that is where our journey begins.
Of who you think you should be. But to confront it is terrifying, because it reveals that your goodness is incomplete, your morality compromised, your purity stained with contradiction. Nietzsche, ever the iconoclast, pushed this further. He suggested that the self we cling to is often nothing more than the residue of external forces, herd morality, cultural pressure, survival instinct masquerading as virtue. When he declared that God is dead, it wasn't merely an attack on religion. It was a call to recognize that the scaffolding of identity most people live by is hollow, borrowed, imposed. His challenge was radical: to become the Übermensch, the creator of one's own values. But such a task requires dismantling every comfort you've inherited. Few dare to attempt it, for the cost is unbearable. Arthur Schopenhauer, in contrast, painted identity as a cruel illusion shaped by the blind force he called the will. According to him, your sense of self is not sovereign, but enslaved, driven by primal urges, lusts, and needs that disguise themselves as lofty choices. Your individuality, he argued, is nothing more than a fleeting ripple on the surface of a vast, indifferent ocean of striving. To recognize this is to feel despair, for it strips you of the fantasy of control. And yet Schopenhauer also suggested that in moments of art, compassion, or ascetic denial, one glimpses freedom from this endless cycle. Modern psychology echoes these warnings. Studies on cognitive biases reveal that much of your self is shaped by unconscious forces. You think you know why you choose a partner, a career, a belief system, but in truth you are swayed by invisible nudges, the craving for approval, the need to reduce anxiety, the echo of childhood conditioning. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre would call this bad faith, the refusal to acknowledge your freedom, the clinging to roles as if they absolve you of responsibility. You say, "I am this way because that is who I am," but in reality, you are choosing to remain in chains. Here lies the hidden problem. To know who you truly are, you must dismantle everything you think you are. You must interrogate not only your conscious choices, but also your unconscious motives, your cultural conditioning, and your hidden fears. And this dismantling is not a gentle process. It is violent, disorienting, and often unbearable. Think of the myths that echo this journey. Orpheus descending into the underworld, Theseus facing the Minotaur, Dante entering the Inferno. All these tales are metaphors for the same descent, the confrontation with the parts of ourselves we would rather not see. To truly know yourself, you must first descend into your personal hell. But why is this descent so resisted? Because the mind, like any organism, is built for survival, not truth. Illusions serve a purpose. They make life tolerable. To believe that your work matters, that your relationships define you, that your morality makes you righteous, these beliefs provide order in the chaos of existence. Strip them away, and what remains? Nietzsche called it the abyss. Sartre called it nausea. Huxley, in The Doors of Perception, saw it as an overwhelming flood of mind at large when the filters of the brain dissolve. Viktor Frankl, who endured the horror of concentration camps, warned that meaning is not given, but created, and without it, human beings collapse into despair. The paradox is unavoidable. Illusions enslave you, but they also protect you. To destroy them is to free yourself, but freedom comes with the unbearable weight of responsibility.
This is why so many cling to identities that feel artificial. Better the comfort of a prison than the terror of open sky.
And so the hidden problem reveals itself. You do not truly know who you are, not because you are incapable of knowing, but because you are terrified of the cost. Still, deep down, you feel the whisper, the restless stirring of the self that refuses to be silenced. It is the voice that wakes you at night, that unsettles you during moments of quiet, that gnaws at the edges of your certainty. That voice asks the forbidden question: what if I am not who I think I am? And once that question takes root, the unraveling begins. The price of knowing who you truly are. Section 3. The unseen consequences. The unraveling begins quietly, almost imperceptibly. A crack in the glass, a hesitation in the voice, a silence where certainty once lived. When you dare to question who you truly are, the consequences spread far beyond the private chambers of your mind. They seep into the fabric of your relationships, your ambitions, and even the way the world itself appears before you. At first, the consequences feel subtle, like the shifting of tectonic plates beneath your feet. A career that once felt fulfilling now seems mechanical. Friendships that once provided joy begin to feel shallow. Even the mirror becomes suspicious. You see not just your reflection, but the traces of masks you've worn, layered over time, obscuring the face beneath. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard described despair not as the loss of hope, but as the refusal to be oneself. And when you begin to awaken to the possibility that you are not who you think you are, despair becomes both unavoidable and illuminating. You realize that much of your life may have been built on foundations of borrowed dreams and unexamined assumptions. This realization, though liberating, comes with a cost: alienation. Alienation from others, yes, but more profoundly, alienation from yourself. You begin to sense the immense gap between the life you are living and the life that could have been. This gap is not just intellectual, it gnaws at the soul. You see how much of your behavior is automated, conditioned, controlled by forces you did not choose. Consider cognitive dissonance, the psychological discomfort that arises when actions and beliefs conflict. Most people soothe it with rationalizations. I hate my job, but at least it pays well. I feel empty, but that's just life. But when you begin the journey of self-knowing, such rationalizations lose their power. The dissonance becomes unbearable. You cannot unknow what you've glimpsed.
And here lies the first consequence. Once you question your identity, you cannot return to ignorance. Like Adam and Eve after tasting the fruit, innocence is forever lost. You now live in exile from the comforting illusions that once held you. But the consequences grow deeper still. Your relationships begin to shift in strange and unsettling ways. Those around you, still clinging to their personas, may feel threatened by your awakening. They sense it even before you fully articulate it. You no longer play the roles they expect: the agreeable friend, the compliant spouse, the dependable colleague. You speak truths that unsettle. You withdraw from conversations that once entertained. You refuse to participate in games of pretense. Some will call you distant. Others will call you arrogant. A few will even despise you. Because in revealing your own mask, you inadvertently reveal theirs, and most people do not forgive such exposure. This is the second consequence. Knowing yourself often means losing others. The social world depends on masks, on shared fictions, on tacit agreements not to look too closely. To break this pact is to risk exile from the tribe. But the consequences grow deeper still. The obvious sense is that of meaning. As illusions fall away, life itself can begin to appear hollow. Jean-Paul Sartre called this sensation nausea, the sudden recognition that existence has no inherent meaning, that things simply are, indifferent to your desires. The coffee cup, the park bench, the passing stranger, suddenly they appear absurd, stripped of the invisible narratives that once gave them coherence. You may wake one morning and find that the world has lost its color, not because it has changed, but because you see it without the lens of comforting lies. The job title, the social status, the rituals of success, all appear absurd, fragile constructs propped up by collective belief. Without them, reality feels raw, chaotic, unbearable. This is the third consequence, the collapse of meaning. And unless something deeper replaces it, despair becomes a permanent companion. But even here, there is something more dangerous, the temptation of escape. Many, unable to bear the weight of this new awareness, retreat into distraction. They drown themselves in consumption, endless scrolling, constant entertainment, shallow pleasures. Others retreat into ideology, clinging to rigid belief systems that promise certainty and belonging. Some turn to substances, numbing the unbearable tension between the false self they can no longer accept and the true self they have not yet uncovered. But here's the paradox. The very act of trying to escape only deepens the prison. To run from the truth of who you are is to entrench yourself further in illusion, to prolong the suffering you sought to avoid. The more you deny, the more the shadow grows, whispering at the edges of your consciousness, demanding recognition. And yet the most profound consequence remains hidden until you begin to see it. The possibility of transformation. The collapse of illusions, painful as it is, clears the ground for something new. The alienation reveals the cost of living falsely. The despair exposes the hunger for authenticity. The loss of meaning opens the possibility of creating meaning.
But this possibility does not come cheaply. It demands that you face the abyss without flinching, that you accept solitude as the price of honesty, that you carry the unbearable weight of freedom. For freedom is not a gift, it is a burden. To be free means to be responsible for your own becoming, with no excuses, no masks, no one to blame. And so the unseen consequences gather. The death of illusions, the loss of belonging, the collapse of meaning, the weight of freedom. Each one sharpens the tension, forcing you toward a choice. Do you retreat, rebuild your mask, and return to the comforts of ignorance? Or do you continue forward, deeper into the labyrinth, toward a self that may destroy the life you know, but finally reveal the truth of who you are? The choice is unbearable. And yet the very fact that you feel the tension means you are already on the path. The price of knowing who you truly are. Section 4. The Rebellion, How to Break Free. Every prison cell has two walls, the one built by others and the one built by yourself. The tragedy is that most people never attempt to leave because they cannot even see the bars. But once you awaken to the unseen consequences, the illusions collapsing, the alienation pressing in, the hollow rituals exposed, you stand before a rare and terrifying choice. You can step back into the prison of comfort, or you can rebel. Rebellion here does not mean rage against governments or revolutions in the streets. It is quieter, subtler, more radical. It is the rebellion of authenticity against conformity. It is choosing to live without the mask, even when the world begs you to keep it on. This rebellion begins in silence, in the intimate act of saying no. No to the false smiles. No to the career path that deadens your soul. No to relationships that demand performance instead of presence.
No to the self-imposed storylines that have chained you to a borrowed destiny. But rebellion is not merely negation, it is also affirmation. It is saying yes to something deeper, something raw, something alive. It is saying yes to the terrifying responsibility of freedom, yes to the burden of truth, yes to the possibility of pain in exchange for the reality of being.
Nietzsche also insisted that the one who survives this exile becomes stronger, sharper, and truer. The first step of rebellion is awareness. You begin by observing your thoughts, your habits, your reflexes. You notice how much of what you do is automatic, how your gestures, your language, even your emotions have been inherited rather than chosen. This awareness itself is a form of rebellion because society thrives on unconsciousness. The second step is refusal. Refusal to participate in illusions. Refusal to waste your life in service of hollow ambitions. Refusal to betray yourself for acceptance. This refusal may look small to the world, quitting a job, ending a toxic friendship, sitting alone in a room rather than joining the crowd. But inside, it is revolutionary. The third step is creation. To rebel is not merely to destroy, but to build. You begin to create meaning where none was given. You write your own story rather than performing someone else's script. Viktor Frankl, who endured the abyss of the concentration camps, declared that human beings are not destroyed by suffering itself, but by the absence of meaning. His rebellion was to carve meaning even from the horror, to transform despair into defiance by insisting on freedom of spirit. And so rebellion is the art of creation, creating meaning, creating values, creating a life that is not borrowed, but authored by you. This is not the easy path. It is not handed down from tradition, nor guaranteed by society. It is forged in solitude, sharpened by struggle, and sustained by courage. But rebellion also demands patience. You cannot dismantle decades of illusion in a single moment. You will falter. You will be tempted to retreat. You will feel the weight of the world pressing you back into conformity. And this is where rebellion becomes not a single act, but a practice. Every day you resist. Every day you choose truth over comfort. Every day you return to the path, even when it terrifies you. And then something unexpected happens. The pain of alienation transforms into the beauty of solitude. The collapse of meaning becomes the canvas for creation. The loss of belonging gives way to the birth of integrity. What once felt like exile begins to feel like freedom. This is the paradox of rebellion. In losing the world's approval, you gain yourself. In rejecting the false, you awaken to the real. In choosing solitude, you discover the ground of authentic connection, because only when you stand as your true self can you truly meet another. But there is another dimension to rebellion, one most people fear to confront: the rebellion against your own shadow. Carl Jung warned that self-knowledge is impossible without facing the parts of ourselves we deny, repress, or despise. To rebel against illusion is not just to reject the masks imposed by society, but also the masks you wear against yourself. This is the hardest battle because it requires you to face the violence, envy, fear, and weakness you have hidden away, to admit that you are not only the light you project, but also the darkness you conceal. But here lies the key. What you refuse to face will rule you from the shadows. What you confront, however, becomes integrated, transformed into strength.
Thus, rebellion is not only external, it is internal. It is the integration of shadow and self, light and dark, known and unknown. It is the courage to stand naked before yourself and say, "This is who I am, and I will no longer flee." And when you reach this point, the rebellion ceases to be merely personal. It radiates outward. Your authenticity becomes a silent act of resistance in a world addicted to masks. Your presence unsettles those still asleep, but it also inspires those who are awakening. You become a reminder that it is possible to live differently, that conformity is not destiny, and truth is not unreachable. Of course, this rebellion is costly. You may lose the comfort of illusions, the security of belonging, the ease of ignorance. But what you gain is beyond measure, the unshakable foundation of a life that is truly yours. And yet, even this rebellion is not the final destination. For beneath rebellion lies something even deeper, something that does not merely resist illusions, but transcends them altogether. The question that emerges, if rebellion frees you from falsehoods, what is left when all illusions fall away? What remains when you no longer cling to masks, when meaning is no longer inherited, when the self is fully faced? This is where the journey leads next, toward the ultimate truth, the final and most powerful realization.